This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello everybody, glad you could make it. My name is Kaylee Ellen and welcome to the first video of 2025. I thought I would start it out with my plant predictions because why not? I've not done one of these videos every single year. Did I only do one last year? Maybe the year before. It's not something I've typically done, but I know it's like the done thing on YouTube and I feel like a lot of people still like to hear my opinion on this sort of stuff. So today we're going to go over my plant predictions for 2025. So trends, things that I think to look out for, things I think to avoid, stuff like that. I look so disheveled. Anyway, let me just find my plant predictions because I wrote them all down because I can't remember them all. I really did sit and think about these, so I want to get my notes on them because I have a few things to say. The first thing I have written down to talk about, guys, is the anthurium craze. Now, craze I've always thought was a strong word, right? In 2024, we absolutely saw a difference in people's attitudes towards anthurium, right? So, for example, in 2023, they were sort of coming in, but not quite. And I feel like people started to get more interested, probably due to the fatigue in the TCing of other houseplants, right? So because loads of other houseplants were getting TC'd, it was sort of spoiling the fun of it for a lot of people. I actually think that's really fair to say that. And I think that a lot of people started buying into anthurium because you could get seedlings and crosses in different things. And they were a little bit like untouched. And that's kind of why I think it took off. I think it took off because for some people, it was kind of bringing the magic back of collecting and finding new things and stuff like that. However, in 2024, I knew this would happen, but Thailand, Indonesia, etc. really stepped up their anthurium game. And I know Indonesia were doing it a little bit more than what Thailand were, but Thailand have absolutely stepped up their game. I know that when I did visit nurseries, say back in 2020, most nurseries had hardly any anthurium. Say there was like a nursery with like 100 benches of plants, right? You would maybe get one, maybe two benches of anthurium, and they're all one-offs, and they weren't really growing them to reproduce and sell them. And I think for whatever reason, maybe Thailand struggled with it. I don't know. But obviously we've seen a huge rise in them. TC, yes, but still less so because there's so many crosses. And once anthurium get going and flowering and you can cross them and you can get plants, it's still reasonably quick. But obviously TC will come in. And my prediction for this is it's going to keep coming in and you're going to start getting more TC'd anthurium. And unfortunately, it is just going to follow the same pattern that everything else has followed. And it both sucks and doesn't suck. It doesn't suck because obviously prices will come down. It does suck because the people that have not decided to get into anthurium, but you know what I mean. The people that love anthurium collecting and stuff like that are doing it for the magic of it. Completely get that. And I do think, unfortunately, TC does spoil that. It does. It's kind of a double-edged sword. So it's cheaper, but it can take the fun out of it sometimes. But I do think that's probably going to happen. I know that every time I look at a supplier from Thailand, they are really pushing anthurium all the time. And of course, the Thai get a hold of anthurium and then all of a sudden there's magically variegated anthurium coming out. That'll be a thing. Personally, in terms of variegated anthurium, I don't think they're really going to take off. Now, this is complete personal opinion and it's actually based off my own taste. So I actually think that variegated anthurium they don't look very good. And I have said this like my entire time on this channel, by the way. So if you don't believe me, you can go back and look at my old videos. But I just feel like a lot of the time, variegated anthurium, they look a bit like someone spilled bleach on them. Like it doesn't look good. And I don't even think that's because it's induced. I think that's just generally how, anthurium carry variegation. And I think if there's ever a variegated anthurium to take off, it's going to be one that doesn't look that way. So it's going to be one that's reasonably sectoral or something like that. But generally, I think the anthurium thing has peaked and I think it's definitely on the way down 100%. If you want to be buying all these really sexy anthurium, I would genuinely practice waiting. I don't think you need to be, on the edge of it. Maybe if it's a cool cross you want and you still care about the whole seed thing, fair enough. I know a lot of people do. Then feel free. But you could start to wait for some of the really notable crosses that everyone seems to be going for, because I'm telling you now, suppliers at the top are going to be looking at what people are going for and trying to get them. It's the same thing as a plant shop buying in plants. You're going to look for what is doing the best. That's the whole point. So the really popular crosses, you could probably wait for. If it's something like a real oddball, guys, then yeah, of course, you can probably go for it. But if it's something a little bit more bell curve, popular type thing, I would maybe practice waiting just to keep in line with the whole cost of living, practicing, buying less and everything else. I would maybe consider waiting for some of those. I feel like I'm blown out. I really can't help it. I feel like that might work a bit better and we're not quite as white on one side of my face. So, my next thing to talk about very briefly is variegated plants. Guys, I really think people are starting to be done a little bit with variegation. Now, that's not everything, obviously, but I think in general, there was this thing in like from 2020 to like 2023, right, where you'd have a houseplant that was normally green, whatever. Someone would have a variegated version and people were like, oh my God, it's a variegated one of these. I think we're so far out of that now. I can't see that happening. Like, I think when variegated spiritus happened, that was probably the last time anyone's gone, oh my God, look at this, in terms of a variegated plant. And not counting any of Monstera, because honestly, that is a completely separate discussion and we will be talking about it soon. But I think in terms of variegated stuff, I think people have just kind of stopped caring, because I don't think people care enough about the premium on these variegated, sorry, I'm just pushing my chair around, on these variegated plants like they did before. I think there'll always be the odd plant. I'm not saying like no one cares about variegates, but I sort of am. Like I just think the price tags that people ask for, no one's playing that game anymore. It's probably the same reason, obviously, that my shop saw like a bit of a downfall, because I eventually, I think I mentioned this on my podcast, I had to start trading in variegates more, right? Because they were the only things that people were interested in, that TC was harder to fight with, and they still held some value. So for a long time, I focused on variegates, but even I could see throughout this last year in 2024 that people weren't really buying them as much. So you can kind of see it coming, and that's obviously only going to continue. It's only going to continue. And the thing with TC is obviously variegates are going to pop up anyway as a result of just general mutation, because you're cloning things so fast. So now I think when variegated whatever pops up, most of the time people are like, oh, it's because TC'd, and like there'll be a few more of that. Do you know what I mean? And also I think in a lot of ways people are really savvy now to the ways that, you know, Thailand, Indonesia or whatever, they induce variegation. So it's not, that doesn't have the magic that it did. Now, they've always been doing it, don't get me wrong, since I started, they've been doing it. But I think now people are, again, it's just another thing that people are kind of sick of. And I think we've really, if there's something we've learned in 2024, as like a past reflection, we really learned to wait. And you know what? Great. Good on us. Because it's probably saved a lot of us a lot of cash. Right. Monstera Sports. This is something that I think is going to massively have its day this year. I know it sort of has already, but I think it's really going to play a part now. This light is so bad. It's literally snowed and it's fighting with sun poking through, and it's really screwing with my visuals, and it's pissing me off. It's really pissing me off. It's great to film in here other than that, but hold on for 1 second. I want to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. If you want to create a website quickly and easily, then Squarespace is the tool for the job. There's a huge selection of up-to-date templates that are fully customizable to your own branding. I've been using Squarespace for around 3 years now, and honestly, I'd never go anywhere else. Squarespace now features something called Blueprint, which guides you through an even more in-depth customization process, allowing you to very quickly personalize and launch your own website online. You can choose the sections that you want on each page, as well as any other suggested pages that Squarespace offers you. You can change all manner of colors and fonts to suit your style, as well as the conversational style that the AI uses. I know. If you want to create a really sleek looking website, either for yourself or perhaps you're setting up an online business like mine, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Kaylee Ellen to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And back to the video. Yeah, so right, Monstera Sports, literally, they are going to have so much of a day this year. I think you're going to see, I wouldn't say you're going to see scandals, but I think if there's any chatter, it's going to be around that, whether it's positive or negative, 100%. I do want to make a comment on the whole Monstera Sports thing, because when I did my video that came out before Christmas, I think I was like, here's some Monstera Sports, here's some examples of some problems that might occur this year in terms of things looking really similar and stuff like that. And I mentioned the video that Pretty and Green did, which if you haven't watched it, please go watch it. It's linked in that video. The thing that I didn't realize was how many sports are actually out there. And I just think if we'll call it the Monstera market, not that it's a person, but if the Monstera market is not careful, it's going to go down exactly the same route as all of the variegated philodendrons and everything else, because people are going to be bored. And it's risky at the minute because there's so many Monstera sports. A lot of people are already sick of that. Just hearing, Monstera pop up on Facebook with a new name and just eye rolling and be like, we need to stop just having a sport sport with a name. And I actually do agree with that. I do think it's getting a little bit dilute. And this is not said, whether I had a shop or I don't now have a shop, it's not said from the point of view of like preserving the value of things. It's just common sense. I really think that people are going to push this too far. I think we're going to have sport after sport after sport after sport. Now, in my video that I did before Christmas, I did pick out a few examples of like, hey, this one's really similar to this one. And a few people are like, well, no, they're not, they're different. And it's like, yes, they are different, but are they different enough to justify hundreds of dollars difference between the sports? No, probably not. I also need you guys to remember something as well, right? And we're going to take really prominent Monstera as an example, and that is the Devil Monster, right? I need you to understand that when that Monstera came out, when it hit, did it air at air? You know what I mean? When it was like debuted at a show or whatever, then someone bought it for a lot of money. That plant was probably already pre-sold to either a nursery or something else, and someone was probably already starting to TC it. I need you to understand this. A lot of the times when plants hit the general public, the people at the very top have already planned this occurring and they know what's going to happen. And there is no point drumming up a hype for something when there is no supply, because it's pointless. It's a little bit like, you know, when influencers do that like pump and dump thing when you get with crypto. It's kind of like that. If there wasn't enough of the coin to go around that they had, the scam wouldn't work, right? You need to have the thing to sell to make the money at the top when it's the most potent. So most of the time when you see a new sport coming in, unless it's like Joe blogs on Facebook or whatever, obviously, a lot of the time this is pre-planned. There's nurseries that have already got a cut. There might be nurseries that have already bought it. They're already starting to do whatever the hell they do with it, TC it, whatever it is. And there you go. Like I sold my Variegate Gloriosum to one or two nurseries in Thailand. I just sold them like, I think one nursery took 2 or 3 leaves because I did it in like 1 leaf cuttings. Somewhere else took 1, stuff like that. I knew exactly what they were going to do with that plant, which is why I then started to sell mine, because I knew the value was going to drop. I still haven't sold very much of it. Notably, I've got so much of it. I've got 2 plants. You won't see it. One of them is here. Yeah, one of them is right here. One of them is further down here. And then I have some upstairs. I have one in my cabinet as well. I've got a few, basically. I didn't really rush to sell them just because I was never like that, really. Maybe I should have been like that. Maybe that's a lesson I should have taken. I don't really go for the aggressive push. But generally speaking, when you get stuff like this, there's a plan behind it. I need you to just be aware of it. You don't have to do anything with that information. If you want to get in on that, fine. Because part of my buyer's advice in tying in with the whole the Monstera sport thing is be very careful. If you want to make money in terms of being a business and not a private seller on Facebook, you're probably going to have to get in very early, and you probably have to move very fast indeed. Because as soon as places like Thailand have the thing, it's going to go straight into production. And these guys really know what they're doing. They are really fast. They are really, really fast. So you are fighting that. And let that be something we've learned in the last 2 years. Any shop is going to fight with that. And I'm almost thinking about doing a video on like advice for shops based on what I can sort of see coming and based on the things I experienced when I was still running. If you want that video, by the way, please leave a comment and I'll probably do that. Just as like an extra video, just chatting about it. I think that could be really useful. But yeah, just please keep it in mind. Now, the Monsteras, a lot of them are similar. You don't need them all. Please, you don't need them all. I think there's a couple I covered, but like Bulbasaur, I think might actually be a good one, even though the name is a bit, okay, like I do think that one will do well. There's a couple in there that I thought, hey, that might do well. A lot of them, honestly, if it's a lot of time, if it's a mutation of a Thai constellation, I would probably leave it. Because there's going to be a million mutations of Thai constellation. And Thai constellation itself almost has this thing now where they're common and people are starting to not care. And honestly, I kind of wish that the industry wasn't like that, but it's rare plants. And we have to admit to ourselves that that tends to be how it is. As soon as a plant isn't rare anymore, a large percentage of people aren't interested anymore. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying be aware of that when it comes to the market. Okay, that's something to be aware of. And you don't have to be a shop to think about that. You could be literally just somebody buying plants. So there's something to think about. The Monstera spots though, oh my god, so many. You don't need them all. It's like my one takeaway from that. I wrote a little note here about downsizing and decluttering. And I've basically said that people are either going to make room for some of the cheaper things that they used to not be able to get. And I've definitely done that a little bit. Or a lot of people are just feeling quite fatigued by plant collections. So for example, for me, you know, like a variegated alocasia fry deck, for example. I've always wanted one. People that have followed the channel for a long time know that. I can now afford one. So in my case, if I was to downsize and get rid of something, it would be to have that. And it's because I couldn't get it before. Now I can. Now's the time because they're not going to get much cheaper. So I think people are going to be doing stuff like that. A lot of people, I think they're just feeling a bit overwhelmed by the size of collections. Now, I've made a video on decluttering, but it's probably worth at some point talking about dealing with those feelings and ways you can help with not feeling overwhelmed with plants, even though you have a lot. For example, most of my plants are in this room. That's amazing. It's amazing because they're all here. I keep them all nice. They do their own thing. They're in self-watering. There's not too many. It's easy for me. And I still get to live with a lot of plants. By a lot of YouTuber standards, though, it's actually, guys, it's nothing. Most of you guys at home probably have more than I have. How wild is that? But it's true. And I'm not knocking YouTubers that have loads. I would love to have loads. I can't, unfortunately, do that just due to the way my house is. Things like the cats, light levels, all of that. Like, this is the room for the plants. I actually have some plants next door on a shelf above my TV, and they're really not doing well. They're doing terribly because it's too dark in there and they are dying. So they should probably come in here. I might put them on top of my cabinet or something. But you get my point. So I think you will see more downsizing. You will see more people being selective. And I think that's great. I think it's what we should be doing now. Now that there's, any plant you ever wanted pretty much everywhere, let's just take some time to curate our collections. And that's something I think is going to start happening. I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on styling things, having like a vibe, a theme, a mood, all of that sort of stuff, rather than here's my big collection. I think we've moved away from that. We're a lot less functional now, and I think we're a bit more emotional with plants, if that makes any sense. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's a really nice place to move to, because I think we could come back full circle and get to the point where, if you remember when you first got into plants, how magical that was. I think we're going to get to that point again, and I think that's really good. So that's definitely a note that I wrote down to talk about for kind of like a prediction. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because it's not really about propagating and selling anymore for most people. It's about curating spaces, and people tend to cut things now, from what I've seen, not really to sell, but because something's got too big, because people are now starting to grow bigger plants, because we're not selling as much, because the market value of the plants has gone down. People have got bigger house plants. Have you not noticed that? Because I've noticed that. There's loads of people with plants like coming off the top of poles, and they're massive and they're big and beautiful. We wouldn't have had that 3 years ago, because they would have been chopped. Because, to be fair, they would have made so much money. And who didn't need extra money back then? Do you know what I mean? So I'm not knocking it. I think it served a good purpose, and why not make money out of your plant collection? My point is, I just don't think people are doing that as much anymore. It's showing in a really positive way. I think people are really turning their attention inwards. And I actually think that's why we've seen the rise of plant care videos and plant chores, because it shows the focus on that kind of thing. So I think that's been really cool as well. But I do think that will continue. What have I written? Oh, I've written something about nurseries. Oh, flippers. I wrote something about flippers as well. Yeah, I've written that plant flipping, and I know it's kind of long gone, don't get me wrong. I can't remember a time that people have complained about flipping. Personally, I don't know, you tell me. But I think flippers. I think flippers are going to account, sorry, I'm overexposed as hell, bosh. I think flippers are going to account for like such a small percentage of the plant community, because what's the point? What's the point anymore? What's the point in trying to flip when things are like so heavily TC'd and there's so many of them to be able to get? There's no point. So I think that's good, but I'm not saying that's not happened for a while, because it has. It's just something that's really come to a head now, I think. Yes, a word on China, and I should have mentioned it with the TC thing. I know China are way more involved now with the rare plant market. Personally, I think they're too late. They're not going to be involved with the rare plant market, if you ask me. They're just going to be involved in the plant market, because I'm sure they've done all the work, all the gains, but the market's moved kind of out of their scope. So I think they'll still sell loads of plants TC, but I think the TC plants are just going to get really cheap. And what you will see, and what I have seen, is when plants are sold TC en masse, they're sold in a state where you never would have sold them. Even back in 2020, when you would have made more money selling them quicker, people are now selling things that are barely out of flasks. And I think it's just any effort at a return on the money, because they understand, the seller understands, that the buyer gets a sweet deal, like a couple of dollars for like a little plant that's barely been deflasked, and the nursery's been able to move that unit on quickly, get out of the lab, so we can push something else through, because either it's not working or maybe it is working, they just want a quick return. So I think in terms of things like China getting involved, you're probably going to see plants being sold younger and younger and younger, not in the best of states, but they won't be held to a high standard, because you're getting it cheap and everything else. So that's either good or bad. I don't really want to say whether that's good or bad, it's just kind of the way it's going, really. Oh, a word on nurseries. So I wrote here, higher end nurseries are going to struggle selling any new plants to shops, etc. I wrote, I know they already have, but they're going to have to come face to face with the TC beast they have created. That is so true. Nobody wants to buy large quantities of TC anymore because even the TC batches are moving too quick. So I know this happened to me. In most of 2024, before I stopped trading, I wasn't buying any new plants in. Even the year before. If you actually look back at my channel, guys, and look for a plant haul, you won't really see them. You won't really see them because there was no point buying stuff in because it was moving too fast for even me and I couldn't shift them. So I wouldn't be surprised if plant shops are struggling. Now, there'll be the odd shop that's like larger and, you know, it will get stuff in. Garden centers, yes, right, fine. I'm talking more here about the boutique independent shops. No one really wants to be dropping money on quantity anymore because it's too much of an unknown. So as much as the shops have been feeling it this year, trust me, the nurseries have already felt this. And I think this year, 2025, is going to be the year where they start to panic because the panic has gone from the bottom and it's going to go back up to the top. And eventually, I know I say this all the time, but eventually what's going to happen is it's going to go full circle and then they will stop producing plants. And then eventually, guys, it will probably go back to what it went to in 2018, 19 when I came about. Because what will happen is they will stop producing TC. Everyone's got it. Nobody wants it. So you've got Thai constellation, right? You've had it for ages. It gets pests. You think, oh, okay, I'll chuck it out, right? Can't be bothered to deal with it. It's not worth it. I'll just get another one that was a bit dog-eared anyway. I, missed waterings, whatever. I'll just get another one. But then you just, for whatever reason, you just don't. Because you're like, oh, a bit sick of them. They're everywhere. I don't need to rush. Meanwhile, they stop being produced at the top. Slowly, you won't realise. Slowly, you'll stop seeing them, right? Maybe Thai is a bad example because I actually think that will do all right. Although it's large form and normal households with civilian people that like plants probably don't want something that big. Terrible example, but you get my point. Eventually, it'll stop being produced, but you won't notice until you go to get one. You're like, Jesus, these used to be everywhere. I can't get them now. And then slowly we will return to the start state that we had in like 2019. But we're a long way off. But this year, telling you now, guys, the nurseries are going to start feeling it 100%. The thrill is not in spending the money now. The thrill is finding a bargain. And I've experienced this very recently. I will get into it on my wishlist video, but I had a wishlist plant that was actually not very expensive. And I went and I bought a cutting of it off Etsy and I had the best time. And I got a thrill out of it, even though I spent £10 or something like that. I had the best time. And it was the thrill of getting something that I really wanted for a bargain. So I think we're all learning that that's where we're getting our kicks from. And the nurseries aren't going to like that. Thailand's not going to like that because that's not how they get their kicks. So, oh dear. The world's smallest violin, no offense, but like they've made so much money. The amount of wealth they have out of there is crazy. I remember the conversation that I had with one of the people that I sold Variegate Gloriosum to. And full disclosure, I think they're about $30,000 or pounds a pop, right, for a one leaf. Very good variegation. But bear in mind, I'm selling this to a supplier, okay? I think they bought one, then they added on another one. And I think they said, I'll not do another one, my wife will kill me. And that's not usually an amount of money that you'd be like, the wife will kill me. Do you know what I mean? That's like, normally that's like, I've spent a couple of £100 on something. Oh, if I get more, the wife will kill me. Just to let you know the amount of money that they have out there, this was going to happen to them eventually. And I know they've already felt it, to be honest. Some of the offers I've had, sorry, this video is a bit rambly, but it's fine. It's my first video back. It's my first recording back in January, guys. You have to allow it. Some of my suppliers would come to me with insane offers throughout the year of stuff they were trying to shift. Like, I think then I'll get an offer for Burley Marks Flame. I had to take a certain amount, but it was like a pound a unit or something like that. And it's like, yeah, I probably could have made profit off that, but I wouldn't get rid of them all. And it got to the point where I was just like, this is hard to explain, but I'm going to try. Sorry, I have to set my camera off again. When a supplier, sorry, this is like a supplier lesson rather than predictions, but we're just going to go with it, okay? This is borderline a podcast. When a supplier approaches you with an offer like that, and this is an advice for a shop, if they are willing to sell you, say 500 of something, you have to take a large amount, but they will give it to you really cheap. They are struggling to shift that, okay? You will also struggle to shift that. Now, you might make some money per unit. Say it's Burley Marks Flame, and you buy it for £1 a unit or $1 a unit. Sorry, I forget, half of you are in the US. You will make some money on it, but your workload's just gone right up. And your buyer has a brain inside their skull, and they will know, shit, they're going for cheap. They're everywhere. Holy shit. A lot of people, not all of them, won't even want it anymore. And I realise, I know I touched on this before, I realise that's ridiculous, but it's just how it works. It's just the mentality of a lot of people, okay? It just is. I just think, be careful. If a supplier approaches you with a lot of something, they're feeling it on their end. That's how I know they're feeling it, because I got some insane offers, like so many cents for a plant. Can you imagine living in that environment where we're offered that? Because I tell you something, old prices pre-COVID would be maybe in UK terms, £65 cost price for a given plant. Say it was like a one leaf gloriosum, that would be 65. I would sell it for like 85 or something like that. Nowhere near enough. When it got to COVID, price for a single gloriosum was probably like $150 or something stupid. It'd gone right up, doubled. Sometimes things would triple. Now, like I've never operated with a shop where you would pay $1 or so a plant. That's just not happened. And I've done this for, we'll call it 5 years, but maybe you could say 4 years. That's a bit of a shift, guys. I won't lie, that's a bit of a shift. Oh, I wrote here. Oh, on the thrill of buying new things. Sorry, this is wishy-washy. I did write, I think people are going to start finding a new type of plant, like, for example, Hoya, begonia, stuff like that. Not massively. It's not going to become what aroids have. Aroids are insanity, but I can honestly see the Hoya market going right up. And maybe a little bit of begonia, just because they're kind of next in line to get the treatment of like the magic and collecting and stuff like that. And very soon, guys, I think I'm going to re-look at Hoya and begonia on my channel. Definitely begonia, because I think there's going to be some interesting things that aren't aroids. I think it's just been so tampered with, this market, and I think people are done. So I did mention that. I did also mention on my notes that alocasia are on the rise. Again, be careful, because the alocasia that are on the rise are variegated types, and the variegated types, guys, are coming out because TC is plentiful. So just please bear that in mind. If you want them to be cutesy and demure and nice on your Instagram, that's fine. If you want them to sell, be careful, okay? These things usually pop very quickly. The variegation tends to pass on. You will get profit out of them, but it might be short-lived. So I just want to put that out there really quickly as like a side note. I am aware that alocasia are becoming a bit funky, but they're also not the easiest of aroids, okay? They're actually on the harder end, in my opinion. They're up there with anthurium, if not a little bit worse, actually. That could just speak to my care on alocasia, though, so don't take that as read, but I've got a word on philodendron hybrids. Now, again, I did a video on this before Christmas. I think it was early December, where I basically showed you guys a bunch of hybrids to expect to hit the market this year in 2025. And honestly, I like them, but I think at the time, the video I did, everything was a Florida Beauty hybrid. Now, I'm not saying that's the only hybrids that are coming out, but that seems to be the focus. And if I could just let you know the amount of approaches I've had in DMs of random suppliers, cold messaging me, trying to shift some of these, there are going to be a lot. And if you can watch my video to see what I'm talking about, a lot of them look very samey. They're also very variable anyway, because a lot of them are F1 hybrids, so they're going to be more variable because it's first generation, blah, blah, blah. So you can get a lot of different things, fine. But generally, a lot of the Florida Beauty hybrids that are being made, they all look kind of the same. Some of them look worse. I think it was the Bobsey hybrid. I just thought that looked really crap. It depends on your taste, but I'm telling you now, these things are going to come out thick and fast, and you are not going to be able to ignore them. You're going to be very sick of them very soon. And that's whether you like them or not, because so many suppliers have tons, and they're all TC small. I think a lot of places are trying to sell them as seedlings, and some of them will be, but a lot of them have already been TC'd. It's that same trick that we had a while ago, where it's like, oh, this is from seed, and it's not as TC. So just be really careful and really do your Googling on which one you want. And to be honest with you, if you're not bothered, skip them entirely. We've seen all this shit before. It's not that different. There's nothing wrong with, say, what were some of the nice ones? Florida Beauty itself is very nice. If you don't like the petioles on it, for example, if they're too long and spindly, okay, maybe this is your chance at a hybrid to get something more compact. Great, cool. I thought the Tortum looked quite nice, the hybrid with the Tortum. There's a couple of others in there that were good, but in general, it's just kind of a different shape Florida Beauty, and it really is down to whether you give a shit, guys. Now, for me, I don't. I think I liked one or two on there. One of the hybrids I liked was because it was a ghosty type and it had nothing to do with Florida Beauty per se. So it really depends on what you like, but I need you to know that you're going to be literally gasping for air, drowning at these hybrids coming out. And it's a shame, because I would have hoped for different hybrids. Yeah, it's a big shame, to be honest. If you want to pick something from, e.g. that video, if you're looking for something, pick a variegated thing that you like, and maybe the ghost type thing that I put in there. Maybe you could pick that as well. Most of it, I just let these things grow out. I can't imagine people being super interested in them beyond seeing what they look like on a video, if that makes sense. Like, I think my video did very well. That's not necessarily indicative of how well the plant's going to do. Just from doing this job long enough, I think people want to see what's coming, and it's very evident that it's mainly Florida Beauty. You know, I think even Aspiratus was crossed with Florida Beauty at one point, and even I looked at it and I was like, yeah, so like, do we even care? Do we even care? Maybe we do. Personally, I don't. Okay, and money where my mouth is, my collection behind me is mainly non-variegates. How many variegates have I even got in this room? Not counting the cabinet because there's just random bits in there to propagate. Variegate Gloriosum, fine. Monstera Mint, fine. Thai, not counting. Just not counting that. That's actually it, guys. Everything else behind me is actually green. So, oh no, I have a green on green Monstera, but I'm also trying to propagate that to sell it. So, okay, fair. Generally, no. So I think the trend this year, to sum everything up, is going to be very relaxed. Very chill. People are going to focus on within, all that jazz, curating the collections, restyling, making things look really good, making things look really big, grown in, urban jungle type stuff, without the emphasis on like a million rows of plant pots. Just going to be slimmed down. I think people have the confidence to remove plants from collections because they're not worth that anymore, and they could pick up a new one if they wanted to. And I think that is great. I think it's a really nice bit of breathing space to have. But I think generally that's where it's going. If you're a seller, be careful, honestly. And I really will do a video on this specifically if you guys want it. I'm not going to know everything, obviously, because at the end of the day, I closed my shop, you know, but I can sort of guess at some things. So if you want that video, fine. For the people at the top, the nurseries, strap in, because I think it's going to get very difficult. And I don't mean that in any way. It is going to get very difficult. I could see they were struggling last year, so I can't even imagine what it's like this year. I think that's probably why they're hybridizing now. They're literally trying to make new plants for us to focus on because they've saturated the current ones. And I think that's the way they're going, but unfortunately, they're not different enough. Like if there was more plants that weren't just Florida Beauty by something, maybe I'd be interested. Maybe some heart shapes. Pro tip, if you're a supplier in Thailand, could you try and do us some heart shapes? Because I actually think people would go for that. I don't know. I just feel like they're really, really nice. Definitely something vining that's a hybrid. I don't know how you'd even do that or what you'd even pick, but something in between two, you know, trailing plants, that would be a really good thing. I think people are loving those in their houses, but generally, I'm not so sure about these philodendron hybrids. I'd love to have one of them, but we're literally talking one, and these guys have made like, what, 30 plus? So, yeah. So that is my extremely garbled predictions. I apologize. I will next year try and make this a little bit more coherent, but obviously I've just closed the shop. I have a lot of garbled thoughts. So thank you for bearing with me on that. And I hope anything I've said in here is either makes sense at the minimum or it's useful for somebody. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you for watching my predictions. The next video you will see, I do believe, is going to be my rare plant wish list. And spoiler alert, there's not a ton on it. Okay, this is not a 20-mile long wish list. It's more half that. So if you're interested in that, that's probably going to be the next video I upload. I also have my merch right here. If you're interested, link is in the description. It's beautiful. I love it. I'm wearing it in large or extra large, can't remember. But the link is in the description for that if you fancy it. Link to my podcast is down below, in where I explain basically all the reasons why I closed my rare plant shop. If you are not aware, I guess you are now. So you can watch that if you want. That goes into the full thing. You can also listen to that on Spotify. And I think that's it for this week's video, I guess. I will love you and leave you. Hope you've had a great New Year and a good Christmas. And I will see you very soon, guys. Bye-bye.